Hello, everyone. I am Jay Young. Welcome to the latest rendition of Young Red Angus Live with my guest, Cory Miller. Today's episode is sponsored by Soilworks. Go to soilworksllc.com and check out their GSR calcium and the product that Cory and I both love, their Bio5, and both Cory and I own the Bio5 Extractor to be able to apply their Bio5 product on our operation. And I'll talk to Cory a little bit more about that and his experience using Bio5 and their teas. But Cory, how are you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Jay.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited about having you as a guest. It's fun, always fun to do these things when there's somebody who is as passionate about regenerative agriculture as you are, and B, I appreciate your friendship, but I also appreciate the wealth of knowledge you are for me and how you've helped me in a lot of areas. So let me ask you my first question for you. Does your farming operation or ranching operation currently consist of, and get into the different revenue streams and stuff that you guys have on your on your ranch, and how many acres it is?
On the ranch, well, a little historical. So when I bought the place June 2021. And at that point, the only thing it had been in constant production of alfalfa grass hay. And then, of course, an intercrop, whether it be a winter wheat or a triticale, as those fields came in and out of alfalfa grass. So when I bought the place, that's what we had. No cattle, no other animals on the ranch, just hay production. And so the first thing I did is brought our cattle to the place. Currently running 95 cattle, a couple of bulls. We raise, we have a small registered herd, some Coleman, some Trexler genetics. And so we'll sell a few 3 to 5 bulls a year. And then everything else ends up in our meat program. And we sell direct to consumer right off the ranch. So as far as our beef, we have chickens, we sell eggs direct. I do some soil classes. That's another income stream. We have a pheasant hunting operation. So we have people out every day hunting pheasants. And we also have sod production. So we get about 60 acres in sod that we're harvesting for the subdivision. We're surrounded by subdivisions. And so I thought it was not a cheap business to get into, but I thought it would be one that had decent return and kind of allowed us to fund this real regenerative side of agriculture that we're doing, and even try to take something like sod that's notoriously negative for soils and do it in the most regenerative way that we possibly could, and kind of try to solve that or answer that question. Is it possible to grow sod regeneratively? We have 4-H pigs that we raise, and aside from that, we also do regenerative lawn care. So as we sell this sod, now we make extracts, and we're treating the lawns of the neighborhoods around us with the same stuff we're using on our fields. So it's kind of a wide overview of what we're doing.
Awesome. Let's cover the cattle briefly, because like I said, I'm planning on having you on later on in the year. We'll specifically talk about your cattle, rotational grazing, what you guys are using for rotational grazing, and then just all the aspects that you guys are doing with your cattle. But you have 90 cows?
95.
Okay, and then from those cows, you sell the registered ones, and then all the rest of them you're able to do farm to table freezer beef with those?
We do. So sorry, I'm just going to grab some notes because I talked about this the other day. So 2022 we finished 21 animals and sold direct, and that was a 420% increase over what we did in 2021. This year right now we've got slaughter dates scheduled for 2023 to finish and sell direct roughly 62 animals that we're prepping for this year. And then that'll be our ongoing plan, is to stay in that 50 to 70 range. I think it's manageable. Those are the numbers that we need to be at to make our financial goals. And I think that's what we have the land capacity to handle.
Got it. Well, like I said, I'll have you back on later on because there's a lot of stuff that you are doing with your cattle that I think is extremely cutting edge, and I want to like that. That deserves its own full show in of itself. But let's talk about some of the other stuff. I think the I want to get into the Johnson Stew and everything you're doing with that, but tell me about the pheasant farm. How did you get into pheasants, and how is that working for you, and how is that working as a revenue stream?
So the pheasant side, you're in regenerative agriculture, and the thought is that we want to keep as much cover as we can. And knowing that our hay business has always cut everything that we produce and sell it as quickly as we can to get more growing, it's not regenerative in principle. We know it's necessary, but we know it's not going to. We're not going to be able to meet our soil health goals. And so I was looking for businesses that would give us income in our off season. So summer, yeah, it's easy to make money on a farm. There's all kinds of stuff to sell. But come wintertime, there's really not. And it was, what can we do in the wintertime to keep my staff busy? But also something that's very productive. And what it did, it answers the question of, we're now incentivized monetarily to keep cover on the soil. It's a place for these birds to hide, so that they're available to be hunted. Before then, you'd come out here and our grass was cut super short, went through the winter with no cover, and it woke up in the spring and we expected it to grow. And so this allows us a way to keep that cover. And then we can put our cattle on it in the spring and graze anything that's excess, but it gets us through the hunting season and in a pretty viable business model as well.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I love the aspect of what you guys are doing there and all the different things that you guys have been able to do on a few acres. Like you guys are right at 1,000 acres.
So main ranch has 1,000 acres. We've taken on a lot more lease land, so we're going to be this year we'll be managing well over 2,000 acres.
Awesome. So Cory, you mentioned 2001. So what were you doing before this ranch? And you did not grow up on a farm, correct?
No, I grew up in Missoula, Montana. I was born in Butte. Grew up in Missoula, raised by my mom.
Sorry. So you just kind of, I'm interrupting you. That's what I was going to say. Just bring us from that point, from the beginning to the end. But I interrupted you. You were doing that, so I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. So, born in Butte. My mom raised my brother and I, essentially alone. Grandparents were a big part of my life. My grandpa would always volunteer to help another farmer next to him, or I guess a rancher in Montana, as we call them, people working cows. So my grandpa would help calve, and then I'd always go to my uncle's every spring and help them brand. But aside from that, I grew up in a trailer park in Missoula, Montana, and we didn't have, I didn't have animals around me. I was in the middle of the city. But high school, I spent some time in the agriculture programs, wanting to learn as much as I could. Fortunate enough to have started a company when I was in high school that grew to a decent size. And then sold that a few years ago and decided I wanted to get back to being outside every day, getting out of the office and continuing to develop businesses, but do it in a way that, I had a lot more control about the quality of product that I was putting out, not super reliant on other people's performance to dictate, the success of what we were doing. And, was able to take a lot of these skills. I have a few other businesses that I also operate with the ranch. But one of them is in mold remediation. And really when I got into the mold remediation, studying cleaning and everything else, it was fascinating as we would go into these houses that were full of mold and it always being a negative. And I kept asking myself, like, why are so many people getting sick from mold? And researching and studying what these molds did, and everything I learned told me that, yeah, we have a very, very, very small amount of bad molds, but everything else is very beneficial to us. There's a quote that I think David Johnson talks about and I'll probably get these numbers wrong, but 9 billion cells in our body and something like 12 trillion microbial cells inside of our body. They're a big impact on our life. And when I started to see the benefits of everything that was happening in our soil and studying, different molds. So, I think there's an opportunity here to really focus on soil health, and kind of led me down this path to acquire this ranch. And so bought it in 2021, and then really start to focus on how to take, and the soils aren't terrible. We have some decent soils. We're solid clay. Soil organic matter as low as 2% and as high as 10%. So a big mix in some great areas, but I knew they could be improved. And so that's what kind of started this regenerative journey for me. And everything kicked off with compost.
Awesome. So when you were looking into that, or when you got started, can you see a big difference between the organic matter of 2 and the 10 when working with it?
Or you can, yeah. And I've got some photos I'm happy to share, but the biggest difference that I find in that, at least being in the fields and observation, even looking at the soil, aggregation. So our high organic matter soil is what it looks like, a bunch of small balls held together by roots and worms. And it doesn't matter where you take a shovelful in that soil, it all looks that way. When you get to our 2% soil, significantly lighter in color. It's wet and your foot sticks to it as you walk by. In our high organic matter, you walk in it when it's wet and it doesn't stick to your shoe. We're in clay, so it's night and day difference between the performance and whether it's holding water or it's shedding water. And we sit in our fields with irrigation. Our 10% soils, we try to get over the fields every 23 days. Our 2% soils, we need to be putting water on every 5 days, or we just can't keep up. And that's the biggest difference, is that when we can wait a lot more time to irrigate those areas without seeing a significant change, because we know that we have the holding capacity in that soil, that's when it makes management decisions get a lot easier. And if you have that flexibility, you perform better as a land manager.
Yeah. Well, I want to kind of give a brief history too of us. So Cory and I started interacting last April, and it was over Johnson Sioux. I think I called you to ask you questions because somebody had told me that there's a guy in Montana doing really amazing things. And then we talked for a long time about everything from Coleman's genetics, which I love. I love his focus on females, and then and then compost and everything in between. And then I forgot to store your number. And like all summer, I was like, man, I wish I could call that guy from Montana, but I'm an idiot. I don't even remember his name. Like, how am I going to find his number? And so then Amy did the video. So Amy, and we'll post this video we'll post the video I'm talking about to the notes for this YouTube live show. So Amy owns, or is the producer of the YouTube channel People of the Plants. That's what it's called, right, Cory? People of the Plants.
It is, yeah, that's correct. And that's an interesting story how that whole thing got started.
Yeah, so she made this YouTube video and posted it, and then like it's only a few days old, and I got 3 different messages from 3 different people. You have to watch this video of this guy in Montana. And one of them was Blake Merritt. So Blake Merritt is a salesman for Soil Works, and so Cory and I both knew Blake. And so Blake is one of the guys that sent me the video, and I was like, do you know this guy? I would love to talk to him. And he's like, yeah, here's his number. He sends me your number and your name, and it didn't register. We talked for 10 minutes. You remembered me, right?
Oh, yeah, I knew who you were from the beginning.
Yeah. So like I'm talking, and 10 minutes in, I'm like, oh my gosh, Cory. And then I was all excited because I reckon, and you're like, yeah, dude, like the whole time. You didn't recognize that I didn't know you, did you?
I had no clue. I thought you.
Yeah.
I thought we were just catching back up.
Then I was embarrassed because I was like, oh man, I just made a fool of myself because I had this great conversation with this guy, lost his number, forgot his name, and then we were able to reconnect. But so I love that because that video just for guys who don't understand YouTube and the way the algorithms work, my channel blew up because of the nitrogen myth video. So that video climbed 180,000 views quick. And that's because of the way their algorithms work with, if they see a click-through rate and it's a high click-through rate, then they push that out to everybody. So my thumbnail was really popular and got a high click rate. So like Corey's video got up to like 90,000 and went a little bit stagnant. My video shot up to 182,000. But to show like the way that the power of a well done video, Corey's video that Amy made, I think is one of the best regenerative agriculture videos I've ever seen, because she tells your story well. Your story is so fascinating and every way that goes together. So like that video, the video of you, I'm pretty sure it passed the nitrogen myth video, but steadily, like your growth was steady. Mine blew up and then just tapered out. And that's the way YouTube works, is like, if it's got a high click-through rate, then everybody's going through it. So like people clicked at your video at a lesser rate, so the growth was steady, but YouTube still feeds it out there to people because people keep sharing it, people keep watching it, and it has a great, huge impact on people in regenerative agriculture. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to about Johnson Sioux that's seen that and is excited about Johnson Sioux because of what they saw you were able to do on that video. So we'll add that in there. Go ahead and tell your unique story about Amy.
Well, just meeting Amy. I mean, so I got really excited about soil health, and every morning here at the ranch, I'll do a class. You know, some days it's 45 minutes, some days it's 3 hours. Just depends on who the students are. And Amy's husband, so they were here visiting on the ranch, touring regenerative farms across the country, and she was making little videos. I didn't know that. But her husband came to my class and it was over, and he pulled me outside and he said, hey, Cory, my wife is a filmmaker and we would love to tell your story. And I said, yeah, I mean, we're right in the middle of production season right now. I'm super busy, but how long is it going to take? And basically I spent 2 hours with her that day. And we just went through, and because I was so polished with the classes, it was easy to talk. It was easy to tell the story. Went around and did 2 hours the next day. And so in 4 hours of filming, she got, the video that she needed. We did a little interview that last morning before she left and put that thing together. And, it took her a week or two of editing and then posted that video. And since then, we've got to be great friends. Phenomenal film. I mean, just what she's able to capture on a camera and the perspective that she brings to this whole regenerative side, with wanting to try and learn as much as she possibly can. I mean, she wants to tell the regenerative story. That is really what, gets her excited, gets her up every day. And lots of really cool things with Amy to come. I mean, couldn't be a better person to be this passionate about regenerative ag.
Yeah, absolutely. And talented. Like, yeah.
Incredibly.
Yeah. So Cory, let's dive into the Johnson Sioux thing, because that was kind of something that you were interested in from the very beginning. So had you heard of Johnson Sioux before you bought the ranch, or did you start studying compost because you knew you were going to need to heal things with extracts? What was your transition there?
So I knew that I was going to need to heal things. And it actually started with a gentleman named Cory, Sunburst, Montana, dryland, small grain farmer. And he had been, making good compost, and then Johnson Sioux compost. And I called him and wanted to talk to him about it. Of course, all of us have second jobs, and he's an insurance salesman, sells crop insurance. And so I got him at the office, took a day or two to catch him, but he called me back and said, I'm the farmer, and you need to talk to my sister. My sister, Darcy, knows, she's been to Dr. Elaine's school. You need to talk to her. And so at that point, my plan was to just hire Darcy as a consultant to teach me about soil biology and help me through evaluate our soils and just kind of help me come up with a plan as a farmer. And I think a lot of farmers do that just, find somebody good to teach you and help you through this process, but get the work done. And after speaking with her a couple of times, she's like, Cory, you're so passionate about this. I think you need to go to school and you need to be the one. I think you're going to go way farther in this than I can take you. And I said, you know what? I think that's a great idea. So I called up or I signed up for Dr. Elaine Soil Food Web School. And that's really where the light came on and everything decided to be good. And from there, we decided that it was, do this, get it done. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, sorry, I had somebody walk in the office.
Yeah, no, that him grabbing that assault rifle just made my day.
Is that what happened? I didn't see behind me.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Apologize. Maybe we got a coyote.
That's great. Great. Hey, great. That's what I love about YouTube Live. It's just live.
You never know what's gonna happen.
That's right.
So anyway, finished the Dr. Elaine Soil Food Web School, and that was actually why I called you the first time. It wasn't you that called me; it was me because I'd seen your videos that you'd posted on Johnson Sioux and wanted to talk to you about it. And that's, I believe, what started our conversations. And so we started building Johnson Sioux's on the ranch at that point, and I'd gotten some initial inoculants from a gentleman named Casey with Catalyst Bioamendments, who makes some phenomenal compost, by the way, if you're looking for something just to get started. And really what we did is we used his inoculants to inoculate our Johnson Sioux reactors with a diverse population of biology as we could get. And then as those cured, then we started applying, and that's where we really got to see some big differences. It took ours a while to finish, but some of the first applications of biology we did were with some of the Catalyst Bioamendment stuff. And in that video, talking about cereal rye, that was the biology that came from Casey. And once I saw the results, I said, we're doubling down and we're going to head this way as fast as we can.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's get into your slides and start talking about some of the stuff that you're seeing on your ranch as far as the biology within your soils and stuff. And then I don't know why I'm incapable of saying my Crosby I'm not saying it right.
Microscopy?
Yes, I can't add the extra P. It's so frustrating. Anyway, like I've been like I was with Nicole Masters and I had to get my deal, and I was trying to say it, and I was like, the study of microscopes, after I said the word wrong like 4 times, and everybody's just laughing. I was like, it is what it is. And then I was making a YouTube video, and I was like, I couldn't say it. I'm like, this word is what I'm trying to say. It's like, no matter how many times I hear it, my brain can't put the P in the word. So anyway,
nobody's judging. We know what you're talking about.
No, I know. Yeah. I'm not worried about it. I just think it's funny.
Yeah, I screw up a lot of words as well. So one of the tests, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of the Haney Test. And if not, they will, because it's a very valuable test. And I'll go ahead and share a screen with you just on a soil test.
Okay.
Real quick. I think you're looking at where it says soil testing full pivot.
Yep.
I can't see because I'm sharing with you, but what's important here is these are some highlights of the test, and I'll just kind of flip through this presentation I put together to show you some things that I think are important. So this Haney test, we got 6% soil organic matter, pH is 7.8. It's quite high. I mean, you're probably not going to get real good corn yields in 7.8 pH, are you, Jay?
We have pretty high pH here as well.
Do you? So are you focused on trying to lower that all the time and chasing it with chemicals, or at least that was a past practice?
Yeah.
So the other thing that's interesting here is our electrical conductivity at 0.37. It's pretty low. We're not getting a lot of exchange. Total digestible solids, 5,100 pounds of N. And for folks that don't know what that is the amount of that particular mineral that is in the top 7 inches of our soil where we tested. And so you can see with 5,100 pounds of nitrogen, it would make a whole lot of no sense to continue to add it if we can make it plant available. And so I went down this road saying, that biology can do that. And why do we see the successes we do in Johnson Sioux's? Because we're adding the correct biology that is going to cycle these nutrients. All right. Next test I did is a PLFA test. And this one is quite interesting. You can see our bacteria 42%, fungi 8%. And we'll move a little bit further down in this presentation. What I want to show you is that we finally, towards the end, find some changes. And those changes are what I believe are leading, what we're seeing actually out in the field. So, of course, beginning with soil testing.
You want to go back to that real quick, Cory?
Yep.
Yeah, so your bacteria to fungus ratio is, what is it? So you got 8 divided by...
Yeah, 0.19 to 1.
Yeah.
So...
Okay. Oh, yeah, I didn't even see that on there. So I'm seeing where it says the ratio. I was just looking at it, the percentage up higher.
Yeah, so we use these, and this is, I use 2 different tests. So I use this, and then we also have a microbiometer, if you've heard of that little tool for measuring fungal to bacteria biomass.
Yeah,
it's a cool test.
I just bought one, but I haven't learned how to use it. I got one at Soil Help You. Oh,
did you? Yeah, no, they're super cool tool, and I use it more for training my staff. People that are working on the ranch. We intend on bringing on interns, and I think it's a valuable tool that once you know how to do those tests. I mean, it's really hard to teach good microscopy skills.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes time. And so in the middle of the growing season, when I need those tests done, I don't have the time to teach. So, but I can teach my guys how to do, or guys and gals to do a microbiometer test, and it gives us those same results. And so I'm constantly monitoring that for change, right? Is an application of compost extract or a tea or dry compost that we're applying to the field, is there a benefit? And we spend, times on tests, and plus you can do it on the ranch. I mean, you don't have to send these samples out and wait for them to come back. The microbiometer just gives you that information right away.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of tell a story of, this, and then of course, how many applications we did. So we have, like you said, a Bio5 reactor, or sorry, a Bio5 extractor. On the ranch, and last summer we were probably making between I would say we probably made 6,000 to 10,000 gallons a week.
Yeah. But for those of you guys who don't know, I have a video on the Bio5 extractor. If you search Young Red Angus Bio5 extractor, that'll show you what Cory's talking about. Go ahead, Cory.
Yeah, so it's a tool for us. We add compost to it, basically wash off the microbes and put them in a suspension of liquid that then gives us flexibility in how we apply it. We apply a lot of different ways, through our pivot, through our drill or no-till seed drill. We apply it through a water truck, just allows us to get in and out of fields quickly. And it also allows us to do applications for others, because it's difficult to haul a sprayer around and bring enough liquid to do applications. And so we got a water truck laying around, repurposed it. But kind of the coolest tool that I've been able to experience is the aerator we have. And being in a pasture setting, you're not planting seed every year. And so the question is, how do you get this biology down into the soil? If your soil's crusted up, you have a big thatch layer, your soil's already armored and protected. How can you get these good beneficial microbes into the soil? And lots of trial and error, came to the conclusion that we should build a system to do that with our aerator. And so we did. We built that we basically added some tanks and gravity fed our extract down into the holes as those aerator tines were coming out of the soil. And what that did is it protected the biology. It got it down in the soil. And as we were slicing those roots, some of the grasses we have are rhizomus. And as we slice those roots and put biology on those root tips, taking soil samples later, 2 weeks or a week, 2 weeks later, we would see significant increases in the microbial populations in each of those slices. And so that told me this was an effective tool to get biology into a pasture setting. Now, of course, every time we put seed in the ground, we're inoculating it, whether we'll always inoculate the seed before it goes, but then we'll actually put liquid extract in furrow with it, and started to see the same types of soil microbiome development that we were seeing under the soil with the aerator. And so told me that, this is a good way to go. We can analyze this, we can see change, and we know that we're getting this biology where we want it, right on the root, and the ability for that biology to start cycling nutrients for the plants so that we can cut off a synthetic fertilizer.
Awesome. So do you have the slides coming up that shows the increase of the protozoa populations and the fungal populations?
I do. Yeah, I do. I want to fast forward a little bit. So one of the things that I did before we really went heavy on the extract, because it took a fair amount of time for us to get our extract, basically to get our Johnson Sue's ready and have good compost that we could start extracting. But I knew I needed to get something into the soil. And so I did this right here. So we actually got 3,500 tons of municipal compost from our facility here in town. Okay. And I would caution folks to just go out and buy municipal compost because you don't necessarily know what's in there. You don't know what pesticides somebody put in their yard. Luckily, I have a lot of experience with biology, the lab setting, and sent some stuff off for testing and felt that the benefits outweighed the negatives. We knew there was potential for something to get in and on our soil, but I felt confident that we were going to be all right. And so I want to point out some of these details of this compost. It came to us 32 pounds of nitrogen per ton. Okay, the good thing about this is it's compost. So, okay, this isn't a more complex nitrogen. All right, a little more beneficial to have in the soil, a little more slow release. 10 pounds of P, 10 pounds of K. We're high in iron already, so I was a little nervous about this iron content, but not bad. Okay, this compost was bacterial dominant. Actually, I don't even think I could find any good fungal in this 3,500 tons if I tried. It just wasn't great compost. It was predominantly anaerobes. Yeah. But what I was excited about is this pH of 6.8. Okay, mine was 7.8. I knew that this would start to lower the pH of my soil. And the other thing that was exciting is the EC was 1.71. Remember, mine was 0.39. So if I added this, maybe this will increase, or some of this carbon will help increase my soil or my exchange capacity. So next thing, we hired a company to come out and apply it for us because I didn't have a big spreader truck, and we applied it 3 tons per acre. This next slide is what's really cool. So in here, you can see in these circles, areas of high growth. But you can also see the exact lines. If you just follow these pivot circles around, you can see the exact lines that this truck drove through our fields.
Oh, yeah.
You can see how it shows up where you got good compost. And then everywhere in these circles, that's a big patch, is where the truck hit a bump on the road and shot out a little extra. Yeah. And so, what I saw, you're never looking at your soil from above. You're always out in the fields and you're like, man, it looks like a kind of tiger stripe. Let's get a drone up there and see what's going on. And that's what it was. It was just uneven application. But it told me that my soil was lacking. And this is some of our 2% organic matter ground. We were lacking housing for the biology. Even if we put them in the soil, they don't really have a food source. They don't really have much. It's not going to be beneficial for them. Most of them will die. Yeah. And so we applied this, and I call it housing for the good bugs. And then we started applying extracts and watering them into this compost we put in the field. And that's when we really started to see the change. All right, I'm going to fast forward just to some slide. This is a cool slide that I took. I'm doing samples every day on the ranch. And when I teach my class, the benefit is that it gets me onto the microscope and doing a sample of either our soil or a Johnson Sue's. But when I pull those up, I'm able to teach everybody that's coming and explain to them what everything is. So, we got our small dots bacteria. We got a really nice strand of fungal hyphae. And then, of course, some plant material and debris around that. Some of the other cool things I found are on this slide right here, and I'll go down a little bit. We can see it up close. So this is a protozoa that I found in our actual soil. So pretty easy to find protozoa in Johnson Sue's. at least my experience. Hard to find it in the soil, and pretty rare to see one with this many. You know, they replicate with a process called multiple fission, and these are eggs essentially developing in this protozoa. And I'd never seen anything like it. You read books and you see 2, 3, 4, not many more than that. And I was able to count 9, and I think there's more than that in this particular protozoa. That's a big deal. That means that the populations of bacteria are good and healthy. And it means that, you know, this particular organism is confident that right now is a really good time to reproduce. And that reproduction is going to continue for that species to survive. So if they're confident, then that's telling me that the whole soil microbiome is improving and heading in the right direction. Okay. Yeah. The other thing that was real excited, and I go into some nematodes in this presentation, but being able to find a predatory nematode. You know, I'd looked in, it took me, I want to say 2.5 months of doing soil tests every day while we're applying Johnson Su's and compost to find the first soil nematode. Of course, it's a bacterial feeder, but to have a predatory nematode show up and actually, you know, in my soil, I mean, I remember when I found this on a slide, I was jumping up and down and screaming, and everybody, what are you so excited about, Cory? And I said, I found a predatory nematode in my soil. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And it means that the soil food web is working. These guys.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think it's interesting that, like, when you think about the biology, just why ingredients matter on Johnson Stew and why diversity of ingredients matter. I think this is a great example because, you know, it's easier for us when I say us, I mean John Neiswanger and myself. When we look at under the microscope, we don't see as many protozoa, but we see more nematodes. And so that's why I think is interesting that it's like, I think that's why diversity of material going into your Johnson Stew is important, because we need to be finding things that are going to bump our protozoa population. So do you want to speak to that? And then also, you know, on the slide there that has the mouth shape, can you explain to them like how easy it is to learn this stuff? Because, you know, it's as simple as knowing like the sphere of their mouth as to whether or not they're predatorial or
I'll go back one slide because it's super simple. So of course on the left, this is a bacterial feeding nematode. What we're looking for, so you can kind of see in this mouth, there's what I would call single esophagus, but this lower black circle inside of that round area, I believe that's called, I forget the technical term, but I believe it's called a vacuole. And when you see that on a nematode, that's pretty telltale sign that it's a bacterial feeding nematode. At least that's how I identify them. Apologize for getting specifically what it's called.
Yeah, you're good.
I don't teach a lot. Just getting into that. Fungal feeders, long, elongated, what I call esophagus or mouthpiece, big round lips. Root feeder, pretty easy to tell. It's got this spike right up at its mouth, and that purpose of that spike is to poke that into that root and start eating that plant material. And then these round shaped object below it is a muscle, and that muscle is what allows it to protrude that spike into the plant root. Predatory.
You should be able to see that spike, right?
The spike is somewhat hard, but you definitely see, you know, the rounded muscle below the spike. Pretty obvious. I've never seen one in our soil, but I've definitely looked at slides and made samples for other folks, particularly in the vegetable. We have a farm here that just grows strictly vegetables, and they get a lot of root feeding nematodes. So that was the first one that I had seen, you know, myself in a sample, but lots of stuff in books. You can search this stuff on Google. I mean, you could become a Google qualified in Google microscopy just by able to look at those images. Predatory are good because they really help control populations, and their telltale is you see this black tooth on it. that right there is definitely telling you it's a predatory nematode. They eat just about everything, and they're pretty good size. And then you got omnivores, and they kind of have the samurai sword, and they're ruthless. Omnivore are really good at controlling populations of all of your other biology. And people, when you were talking about you see high levels of nematodes, that's not a bad thing, at least as far as compared to protozoa.
It's just you need to know which ones are beneficial and which ones are negative.
Yeah, so if you have bacteria, as long as you don't have root feeders, you're in pretty good shape. If you're seeing root feeders, you don't want to be putting that stuff in your soil. But keep in mind, Johnson Sue's, we don't have roots in there.
Yeah.
So you're probably not going to have a root feeder.
Yeah.
They just don't. That's not where they want to live. But you're making a comment. I think there's something that's important to that with bacteria and bacterial feeding nematodes and protozoa. Those guys eat about 10,000 bacteria a day.
Yep.
Right. And something that I think people don't talk a lot about, or maybe don't fully understand, is the relationship of how nutrients are exchanged as far as protozoa and nematodes when they eat that bacteria.
Yeah,
so
and this we talked about the other day that you're going to explain the breakdown of what they release, right?
Yeah, I think this really kind of clarifies how the process works. So bacteria has a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 5:1.
And do you have that on your slide? Can we pull that up?
I do. I'll zip back up here real quick. So carbon to nitrogen ratio of 5:1. Bacteria's produce enzymes, and they are able to mineralize rock. That's their job. They reproduce very fast, every 20 minutes. So you have 24 hours, you're going to have 16 million more. Really quick changes in their supply to the food chain. So, you hear people adding molasses to their soil. Well, why do they do that? Well, a big part of it is because there's sugar. Big part of sugar is a very important for bacteria. Start the reproductive process, and of course nitrogen. When we make our Johnson Sue's, our high nitrogen source is the food source for that bacteria. All right, so when you have the food source available to them and lots of their friends nearby, they're gonna reproduce. Their reproduction is what causes a compost pile to heat up. I think it's every 10 million, and don't quote me on this statistic, but I think every 10 million bacteria will raise the temperature in your Johnson Sue compost pile by 1/10 of a degree. And so as you start that heating process, you can tell, you're really reproducing, really heavy reproduction in the bacteria.
Yep.
But get back to what it is. The bacteria 5:1 carbon and nitrogen is very important. And then you have our protozoa, or nematodes, all of these higher level predators in the soil food web have a carbon and nitrogen ratio of 20 or 30:1. So what does that mean? That means that if I'm Mr. Nematode and I'm hungry and I want to get energy from eating bacteria, I need to eat 5 of them, okay, to get my 30 carbons, because they only have 5 carbons. So I ate 5 of them, and I get 30 carbons. But because I ate 5 of them, I also get, 6 of them, I also get 6 nitrogens. I only need 1 of those. So what happens? Well, I go to the bathroom and I get rid of those nitrogen molecules and put them back in the soil into an inorganic form that's now plant available. But I'm not only doing that with nitrogen, I'm doing it with all of the excess mineral that my body doesn't need. And that is why the soil food web, continues to cycle nutrients under the soil. That's what feeds the plants. And so if you have good predator populations and you have good healthy plants that are sending root exudate to the soil and feeding that bacteria, you're going to be cycling nutrients a lot faster. And that is the ultimate goal. Is really, my goal now is how quickly can I cycle nutrients? How quickly can I take that 5,000 pounds of nitrogen that I have in the top 6 inches of my soil and make it plant available? make it so it doesn't matter what seed I put in the ground, everything that that plant needs is available. And that's the ultimate goal. And so it works down to that fundamental level that when you eat excess, what's excess comes out of your body in waste. Excuse me.
So Cory, one of the arguments that Kyle Schnell and I have, and I mean, it's always respectful, but on the Johnson Sioux page, people will talk about their ingredients, and Kyle will say something about, well, you need to have a higher carbon, like level of carbon than what you currently have, and he'll bring up the carbon to nitrogen ratio, and people pipe up and they'll say, hey, that doesn't matter. Can you speak to then explaining this with what you just explained about the bacteria? Kind of take them through why, if you have too high of a nitrogen source and you heat up too quickly, why that's detrimental for the fungus and why you destroy that fungus to bacteria ratio.
Yeah, well, temperature's a problem, right? We have to hit certain temperatures to be able to kill the bad biology as well as kill the weed seeds. But if we get too hot too fast, we're also killing a lot of our good biology. And you'll see that the city compost that we get, it's obvious when it arrives that it's essentially burnt, right? It heated up way too fast. We lost a lot of the good guys and we're stuck with the bad guys remaining that came back in after it cooled and filled the vacuum. There's some benefit. I mean, a lot of our anaerobes are going to die or at least be removed at a lower temperature. Our aerobes tend to survive a little bit higher temperatures, but if you have too much nitrogen, you're going to burn your pile. And that is, a lot of the conditions there depend on what your environment is. We're a lot further north than you. We have cooler temperatures. If we're trying to make a Johnson Sioux in the fall or late fall, we're going to need a higher level of nitrogen just to be able to meet our temperatures. But I had an interesting conversation this past weekend with Steve Shivers, which as well.
Yep.
And Steve is doing a lot of different testing with Johnson Sioux and had some pretty interesting data. And one of the Johnson Sioux that he made was just straight oat straw. And he had taken some temperature samples over the course of, I think, 10 days. And what was really interesting to me in that straight oat straw, nothing else in it, no manure, no nothing added to it, just straight oat straw, were some of the highest temperatures that he had. And I had just gone through this issue on the ranch where we had raised an oat pea barley hay and my nitrates were through the roof. I mean, too many nitrates. I couldn't even feed it to my cattle, couldn't feed it to stock, couldn't sell it. But it became a good compost opportunity. And I was telling Steve, I said, I think you don't know this, but I think that oat straw that you put in there was probably super high in nitrate. And that's why you got these, incredibly high temperatures in your Johnson Sioux. And, I don't know, and not saying, if you would have recognized that or not, but it was important. So I said, do another test and try not to use organic hay that was following, or organic wheat straw that was following a soybean crop, because we know that soybean, there's a lot of nitrogen in that soil. And if you're following up with oat, you're going to have some high nitrate, it could burn. And so a lot of just knowing what your ingredients are. A lot of people think, well, it's oat straw, it's probably just going to be carbon. But carbon that has a lot of nitrate in it.
Yeah. Well, and I had carbon that didn't have a lot of, or oat straw that didn't have a lot of nitrate in it, but it was still put up green. So, I mean, if you're taking something that was a green source when it was put up for hay, a lot of that's still going to be within the plant.
Correct. Yep, you will.
So, anything else from this presentation that you wanted to bring up, Cory?
Yeah, I want to take you guys down to the end and just kind of show you some of the stuff that we really saw that was cool.
Oh, hey, actually go back, because we did not talk about how you changed that. Show that soil after you applied the extracts and what you were able to get on the how much did you bring the protozoa populations up and how much did you affect the fungus to bacteria ratios?
Yeah, so that's where I'm headed. So I'll show you that and then kind of.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what are soils? So to get there, right, we have to grow crops. And these crops, we cover crops, but predominantly we're in hay, but in fields that are coming out of hay or alfalfa stands old, and we're getting ready to rejuvenate that stand, we'll go with cover crops. And so, the turnip, radish, sorghum, is the stuff you see back here behind me. My daughter's standing in some triticale. You see that on the ground that we seeded in some low ground. I think also some radishes and turnips down underneath. And then of course, over on the right, you can see this nice buck out in the field where a cover crop's over its back. And the only thing you see is horns. What we find, the wildlife love our cover crop fields, especially with biology. They're getting all the vitamins they need and they don't have to eat nearly as much as if they were just out in grass. But when we were all done and we started to look at soil tests, 2022, I think it's important. So the 6% soil organic matter we started with increased to 6.4. Our pH of 7.8 dropped down to a 7.1. Wow. We didn't add anything synthetic. The only thing we put on there was compost and then had the action of biology. Our electrical conductivity 0.37 up to 0.79. So we're right at the bottom end of a good EC level. Of course, almost doubling that. But what was really interesting is when we get in these PLFA tests. So you can see our bacteria in 2022 dropped. Okay. Our fungal percentage increased pretty significantly. But what was really important to me is this 2.21% protozoa. Why is that important? Because that tells me, in my opinion, and I'm trying to put that out there for other people to look at and evaluate, but I think that protozoa is a true indicator of soil health.
Yeah.
Protozoa show up in aggregated soils. Okay. Protozoa need healthy bacterial populations that are changing, right? Differences in populations. They have to reproduce. And for you to show a protozoa biomass, change is pretty significant. Is it just that I put all these out there and everything that I put out there out of our Johnson Sue's died and they showed up on this test? Is possible. But I also think that that's a fairly big number when you compare everything about your soils. And so seeing something show up for protozoa biomass tells me that we have a very healthy soil microbiome underneath our plants. The other thing that was important is our fungal bacteria increased 0.5 to 1. We're headed the right direction. And then test another microbiometer 0.65 to 1. So all in all, that told me that, Cory, basically what you're doing is working. The metrics that, are kind of the standard practice now to evaluate what our soils are doing, we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what role has the Bio5 product that you can use the Bio5 extractor to extract your compost, but they also have the Bio5 product. How have you used that, and how did that work as a tea when you guys use the Bio5 from SoilWorks?
So we tested it, when I picked up my machine, Blake was nice enough to give me a sample to try. And a good friend of mine here in Missoula had been speaking with Blake too. He actually did a trial with his daughter as a science fair project, just testing, regular soil as compared to with a Bio5 inoculant in the soil as opposed to a compost extract, and got really good results. We did a test strip, and I will tell you, their product as an extract, way easier to work with than some of the messes that we pull out of our Johnson Sue's. Yeah. We have big chunky wood. We're plugging up. You've been through the process, it's a mess. Their product, nice and clean, easy to put in, easy to get out the extract with really little to no cleanup when you're done. So I like that. As far as tests goes, did great. It's hard to identify a specific area in the field where you do a sample and then remember to go and do a specific before and after test. But looking across our field, we did, I think, with that first application, 20 acres in a 50-acre field. And the only place that we had any difference was in the area that we didn't put any biology on that seed. And that was a weed patch. So, weeds took over and we didn't have really anything happening in that area. But as far as how it performed with the Johnson Sioux that we were applying, it was great, did the job.
So I got a couple questions here to go through with you that some of the guys that are watching asked.
Yeah.
So one guy wanted to know about biochar, like if you've added any biochar to your compost piles and how that worked out.
So I think, and this is my personal opinion, and I may be wrong, and I hope to be proved wrong someday. Biochar is a very effective long-term carbon source in your soil, but I think it competes with your plants. I think it's really good in small amounts. But biochar being charged and being the storage, I think a biochar is really an indoor storage facility and in your soil, and it's going to hold nutrients. It's going to hold water. It does all kinds of beneficial things. But I think if you overdo it, it's going to be taking those nutrients from your roots, and biology is going to be happier, not necessarily happier. It's not getting fed sugar, but it's protected there. And so I have not done any tests on my land with biochar specifically. We had a ton of carbon through compost, but biochar specifically, I'm not sold on the concept yet. I know it's beneficial, but I don't know exactly how much it's going to be beneficial for my conditions.
Got it. So I guess this is Andre. He asks, have you tried to apply compost extract as a foliar on growing crops? So for us, we did on wheat, and our wheat did really terrible. So we didn't see a huge net benefit, where we didn't see a result in yield boost in between the two. But I know that there's some pretty cool guys doing some stuff in Montana where they're doing foliar applications of Johnson Sioux, and they haven't had to spray for stripe rust in quite some time. So I'm excited if we get a wet spring to be able to see the differences where we've applied compost extract to our wheat and see the benefit there. Cory, what are you seeing on where you've done foliar applications?
I think that going forward, that's probably, I'm not going to say that's all we're going to do, but our focus is going to be on foliar with micronutrient applications as well. I think it's an easier way to manage your plant. And what I think a lot of people, well, I'm not saying they look at it the wrong way or a different way, but it's really difficult to build a healthy soil if you don't have a healthy plant. And the easiest way to manipulate the health of that plant is foliar, feeding it the nutrients that it needs that day at that time. And so there's some valuable stuff with plant sap analysis and even some things that you can see in a Brix refractometer that tells you when those are necessary. And so this summer, the focus of pretty much everything that I'm doing on the ranch is going to be on making extracts, and by extracts I mean with added nutrients depending on, or micronutrients that we're needing in the plant at that particular time in the life cycle. And I think all in all, people have studied John Kempf and lots of others out there doing, really spending time on the plant physiology side. We'll start to realize that when you put biology with micronutrients applied to the plant, when the stomata is open and accepting, mineral, that you start to see some really off the charts results. 10 times more uptake. You have what's available. And, John talks about this, corn, the genetics of corn being, or at least as far as yield potential, of 1,100 bushels an acre. And wouldn't we all be excited to be able to realize that? Well, everything that happens in that plant's life, whether it's too much shade, not enough water, no nutrients, all of these negatives affect what the genetic potential is. And we end up with, 70 to 250 bushel per acre corn. And I think one way as farmers that we can really functionally manage that is with foliar applications. And so I've done, my focus this winter has been on studying that relationship between plants and nutrients, and really being able to understand how that works in everything that we grow on our place. And when I start to see things on testing, how we can immediately get the nutrients that is deficient in applied as easily and as quickly as possible.
So Cory, that's something that I wasn't aware of. I just became aware of that in the last 6 months from seeing, and I wish I knew the guy who was doing a lot of the stuff in Montana that I learned from, because I shared his video with a bunch of people, and then you probably know him, and maybe you don't know who I'm talking about, but that video got taken down for whatever reason by the people that put it out. So then I forgot the guy's name and whatever. But one of the things I learned from him is that half the plant's nutrient uptake comes from the leaves. And I also didn't realize that a plant secretes exudates from its leaves. And this exudates from the plant leaves is the same function that you get when you have the roots secreting it, and it brings micronutrients within, to the stomata of the leaf. And then that's how it's able to fight against stripe rust, is like, as those fungus actually penetrate into the stomata of the leaf, they live and colonize within the stomata of the leaf, so that you can't have a parasitic fungus living on that plant, because that plant, the beneficial fungus, is going to fight off those things. Like, do you have any more information or like stuff that you want to add to that as far as why that's so beneficial and what it's doing?
I don't understand corn, so I don't want to comment, specifically on stripe rust or things in general, but I will say this, and it's, what pertains to biology is exactly what pertains in our, downtown and our metropolitan areas. Location, location, location in real estate. And just like you, the most valuable point is at a main intersection. And if you're biology or a pest, where do you want to be? You want to be at the main intersection of nutrients. And if a plant is weak and unhealthy, and it has an opportunity for a pest to get in there, it's going to attack it at that area, the intersection where all the nutrients are flowing by. So what I look at it as is, if we're applying a foliar, aerobic, predator dominated Johnson Zoo compost extract to a leaf, okay, and those good guys that we're putting on there are taking up that real estate, that they're going to be defensive of that leaf, and they're going to attack these intruders, whoever they may be, the bad biology that's coming in. And a really simple way, and I've seen this in our field, it's actually really exciting to see when you notice it. But as you increase your Brix level in your plants, it's a sign of plant health. And at least as far as pests go in the insect world, they aren't able to metabolize sugar. And that sugar turns into alcohol, or alcohols, not what we consider, it's not beer, but into alcohols, and ends up killing them. And we had a good example of it on the ranch this year, where across the road from us, the county road from us, overgrazed pasture, not much maintenance been with it, high in weeds, probably significantly bacterial dominated, big grasshopper problem. And those grasshoppers would crawl across that road and get to our field, and they would only be able to eat about a foot or two into our field. And it just happened to be that area was right next to a main line for irrigation. So I'd go out there and I'd be turning on a wheel line or turning off a wheel line, and look down and just see all these dead grasshoppers building up on the edge of the field. And that's what it was. We had, Brix, in our alfalfa grass hay in that particular field that was, north of 13%, saw it as high as 18 this summer. And it told me that what we were doing was good, because we didn't have a grasshopper problem.
So
we didn't.
the sugar level got so high in the plants that it was killing the The grasshoppers.
Natural is a natural defense. Yeah, it's not allowing those insects to metabolize sugar. They're dying. And you know, you read about this stuff, but you don't actually see it in the field. And that to me was really exciting. You know, you're out there opening up a wheel line, you look down, all of a sudden, like, why are these grasshopper carcasses down here? Well, that's why. You have good, healthy plants, and insects specifically don't survive in that environment. And extracts and why you're, you know, I don't understand stripe rust, but I could make a bit of a play on it, that if you have good biology in the part of that plant that bad biology or the unwanted biology is trying to attack, whether is stripe rust a fungus?
Yeah, it's a fungus that attacks the wheat plant.
Yeah, so if you have good biology taking up that real estate in a healthy plant, it's not going to be able to get established. And so foliars and compost extracts are really effective at taking up that real estate.
We had a few other questions I want to go through here real quick, Cory. So let's see here. Michael asked, are you fermenting any biofertilizers to get the minerals into the microbes before spraying? Michael, I am not. There are some biological products that I'm looking into, but I have not done that. So Cory, did you want to answer that?
I will. Yeah. So I played around. I would say this. So we'll take 275 gallon tote, and we will put a 50-pound bag of kelp in it, and we will, you know, fill that with water, stir that around multiple times. We'll add some bacteria. I actually have one sitting on my desk right now, a Spectrum product from Tanio. And if you guys don't know what Tanio is, phenomenal place to get, I don't know if you can see that very well, phenomenal place to get inoculants, to start playing with some of these, what I call concoctions. But what really got me interested in it was the potential to make tricanol. And tricanol, of course, is a growth hormone that's in alfalfa. And seeing some old recipes out there for the production of tricanol really got me excited about it. So we did exactly that. We took alfalfa, put it in water, let it sit, mix it up, try to pull as much of that, or alfalfa meal, sorry, out of that, and then added bacteria and see what would happen. Ferment. I think we let that sit for 32 days. Took it out, looked under the microscope. Everything appeared to be pretty good. Applied it, and it was fairly late in the season when I started this project. I didn't see results. You know, tricanol, you're assuming that you're just going to get this massive growth and everything's going to take off. I didn't see that, but what I'm excited to see is if it changed how that plant wintered. And so this spring, we've already got some tricanol going. We've got some other mixtures that we're fermenting right now, just to see what might work. And that's going to be one of our big focuses this summer.
Awesome. And then Chris asked, he's going to modify his drill to be able to do Johnson Sioux in furrow. And he just wanted some recommended fertilizers. I'm going to buy the system that you got for your irrigated, Cory, so that we can fertigate. If Chris, I don't know if you have the ability to fertigate. If you don't, we use urea. You want to get down to where you're applying less than 50 pounds of nitrogen per acre, because Dr. Christine Jones says if you don't get below that, the N is going to be this applied N is going to begin to affect mycorrhizal fungus colonization and other fungal colonizations, and then you're not going to be fixing nitrogen from any of your nitrogen fixing plants, and it's not the plant that fixes the nitrogen. That plant has a relationship with the bacteria that brings the plant the nitrogen, and so it won't secrete the exudates it needs to attract the bacteria that are going to bring it the nitrogen not naturally, and so you're not going to see the nodulization that you want on those legumes. So it just kind of depends. So we use, we're going to do 40 pounds of actual of urea and have 40 pounds of actual in our applications. And then we're going to fertigate with nitrogen, but we're not going to fertigate more than the 50 pounds in any one setting, so that we're not affecting the populations of fungus and beneficial fungus and bacteria negatively. Cory, did you have any thoughts on that you wanted to piggyback off of
that? No, I mean, you explained it pretty good.
Okay. Okay, so I thought of this. I wanted to bring it up. I might get you in trouble, but so it was so funny. Some guys were like, I'm on a Facebook group, and there was an argument over whether or not if you spray chemicals, whether or not you're regenerative or not. And it kind of cracked me up because someone, was talking about regenerative organic, or, that you can get away from spraying chemicals altogether. And, look at this video with Corey Miller, and he was sharing your video. And I was like, if only this guy knew Corey's true thoughts on organic labeling.
I don't say this in public too often, but organic, I've explained to you specifically why I don't like it, but it's just way too much tilling for me. I mean, my focus is 100% on the biology. And I know that so if I have a healthy microbiome in my soil, I can manipulate the plant with foliars. And, are weeds a problem? Well, they are, but what I'm seeing is that when our soil is healthy and we have good plants that are able to grow in that environment, we're selecting for those species, and we're selecting against the weeds. And the weed pressure that we have, especially in our cover crop fields, is they don't like the biology. When we apply it, we see significant changes in I would say just weed populations in general, but they're being pushed out. And especially in our hay fields, if you have a healthy hay field and an alfalfa grass mix, nice, even, and you're feeding it foliarly, you got good biology at the roots, like weeds just cannot get in. And another trick we do, and everybody says you waste hay, but we cut our hay at 8 inches, which is pretty high. But the benefit there is that our recovery on that plant is so much faster. Every inch that you leave above 5 inches is theoretically 5 days of growth. So if we've got 3 days, we're 15 days in it. That's half the maturity or half the growing season of an alfalfa cut at 28 to 34 or whatever days. And I would rather cut a super healthy plant, save some for recovery, and continue to feed that soil than cut it too short, turn it off, stop the roots from exudating, stop feeding that biology, and then try to recover the whole system. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, Cory, was there anything that we did not cover tonight that you wanted to talk more about? I mean, I could dive into the whole Pheasant Farm deal and pick your brain on that and talk about, I think I should probably have you and Roy Foltzgraf back on the show, because Roy's super good at thinking outside the box and finding other markets and stuff, and then marketing things locally. I think the two of you in a YouTube live together on finding outside markets would just be awesome.
I was at the No-Till on the Plains conference, or sorry, not No-Till on the Plains. I was at Practical Farmers Live conference last week, and they do this super cool thing called lightning rounds, where people can get up for, I think it's 8 minutes each, and just talk about their business and what they're doing. And there's a guy that got up there and talked about his maple syrup business. And he basically went around Ames and would tap trees and pull the maple syrup off and cook it up, and had a thriving business based on that. And I get back to Missoula and I'm looking around, and we just got maple trees everywhere. And I'm all excited that this new enterprise that we can integrate into the ranch. And then I find out that they're not sugar maple trees, they're Norway maples, and you can't make syrup out of them. I was so disappointed that I couldn't take something back and come up with a new business around.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Cory, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you so much, Soil Works LLC, for sponsoring it. If you guys want to look into the Bio5 extractor that Cory and I talked about, or their Bio5 product, we didn't really get into that, Cory, but Cory's been able to make some pretty good teas with that Bio5 product, correct, Cory?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we're in the video that we put out on YouTube, you see Kevin, and Kevin's title I think in the video is micromanager. Kevin's phenomenal. His background in science goes back, long before I was even born, and been around to see, studied, out in savory grazing and everything along the way. And Kevin takes that job incredibly seriously. And the quality of product that he's able to extract and have available for us to use on the ranch is awesome. I mean, he just happens to be my stepdad, so helps out that we get to spend some time together on the ranch, and it allows me to divide and conquer. As you know, Jay, it's really hard to do all these tasks as a one-man band or as a small band, and we have some great guys on the ranch that help out, and all along the way. So yeah, amazing machine, and Kevin kicks out some good product with it.
Well, I think you're doing a phenomenal job of it. You inspire me on a regular basis. I appreciate our friendship, and this has been an awesome YouTube live show for me, because I've really loved how you went into your presentation and went through all that stuff. So I'm looking forward to talking to you on the after hours show. But that's all I have for Young Red Angus Live. Next week we will have Jordan Rhodes of Rhodes Red Angus. I'm really looking forward to that. And the following week, Dr. David Johnson. So stay tuned for those. Again, thanks, Cory, and you guys keep